So I'd wanted to talk about this story back in October, but things got crazy, and honestly, I forgot to talk about this one. It's a story that I really want to lay out there for you guys to understand something about me. First of all, I want to preface by saying I'm not a big fan of the zombie genre. To me, zombie stories tend to follow the same tired cliches all the time. It's the reason I didn't get into The Walking Dead. It's the reason I'm not a big fan of stuff like 28 Days Later or Night of the Living Dead, the remake anyway. I saw the original. It was okay, a little hokey, but it was okay. Most zombie stories just don't impress me because they're all the same. I mean, I could literally make a checklist of all the stuff you'd see in a zombie thriller or in a zombie horror movie or show and probably click off at least 9 of the 10 boxes. And so I just never really found them that engaging. If I can predict so easily what's going to happen in them, I mean, why on earth would I want to follow? Plus, zombie stories are some of the stories that I feel like tie themselves way into, socio-political talking points way too often. I feel like that was one of the big weaknesses of George A. Romero. He kept falling into that trap way too often in his later pieces, but that's beside the point. The point was, I was talking to my community when I was just a writer on DeviantArt about my dislike for zombie stories, and a couple of people tried to challenge me saying, hey man, if you don't like zombie stories, you're a writer, why don't you write your own? Try to write one that doesn't have all the same cliches. And I said, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So at the time I was still friends with Mika, and I told her about my desire to do this. She was supportive, and we decided, all right, well, let's make something. Well, I already had a story going on called Raised Again, which was my first idea for a title. But that wouldn't work. So instead we came up with the story title Reanimated. Now, what's the story? In this story, essentially the zombie virus has existed for a long time, but the vast majority of people don't know it exists because in order to contract it, certain conditions have to be met. It comes from a very specific fungus that grows in very hot, humid conditions, and most of the time, in order for it to infect you, it has to seep into the blood somehow, or it has to be ingested, and most people know not to ingest this kind of fungus. As a result, it only really infects people who don't know any better, or people who live in third world countries, or very outside of the scope of normal society, like your small villages and stuff like that. And usually when there's an outbreak, the government can jump in, or the United Nations, or NATO can jump in, silence the issue, and then move on. In fact, they've created a standard of like different scales of issue. On a scale 1, it's a minor thing, small village outbreak, easily dealt with by local law enforcement. Scale 2, a small region has been taken, usually something the size of a state. And if that happens, you may need to call in external forces to quiet it down, to deal with the situation. And at scale 3, an entire country is at risk. And in that case, let the cats out of the bag, let people know that all travel to this country is blocked off. You can't go there, don't do anything there. And then scale 4 is where you have a full-on worldwide pandemic. And the goal is to never let this happen. Well, this has been going on for countless years, but they've always kept it under wraps because it's very rare that it gets out. Well, cut to modern day, and the United States CDC has decided we're going to make a cure or vaccine for this virus. In order to do that, we need samples of the virus. So a truck is driving samples to the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. And along the way, the truck suffers an accident, and some samples of the virus escape into the water supply that leads into the city. Now, they inform the proper authorities and they shut down the water as quick as they can, but not before people obviously were infected. So probably about a sixth of the entire state, well, not the state, obviously, the city of Atlanta was infected overnight. And so the story opens with our main character, a girl named Maxine, or Max, wakes up. Her mother works at a local hospital. She knows her mom probably went to work, but as she's walking outside to get ready to go to school, everything looks weird. It looks different. Cars are parked everywhere. There's screaming in the sky. There's smoke. There's fire. She's like, what happened? Because she slept through the whole thing. She's worried about her mom, so she goes to the hospital to try to find her. And therein, she discovers zombies. Man-eating, flesh-hungry zombies. and she isn't sure what to do about it. She was totally unprepared for this. She doesn't know what's going on. She gets saved at the last minute by a young man named Christian, who is a sword-wielding badass who manages to kill off some of the zombies rather efficiently without much hesitation. And he seems to know a whole lot about the zombies, even though he shouldn't, And while they're scouring through the hospital, they discover a doctor who's been bitten. He's slowly turning, but he explains that in the limited time they had, they were able to create a small vaccine for the virus. Now, the important thing about this vaccine, it will not cure someone who's already turned. But if given to someone, it will make them immune from it, so they could be bitten and not turn. They need to get the vaccine out of the city. Now, Max doesn't really care about that. She just wants to find her mom. But the doctor explains your mom might already be outside of the city. Because what has happened is a number 2 emergency has been declared by the United Nations and the United States government. Portable barricades have been routed to all major points of entrance and access to Atlanta City. And now the city is basically walled off. The military is stationed all outside of the city, ensuring that the undead do not get in or out, and that anyone who's possibly infected is scanned and dealt with before it can become a problem. The only reason they haven't carpet bombed the city is because of the knowledge that the vaccine could still be worked on. So their goal now is Max and Christian have to team up and get this vaccine out of the city and hopefully to the proper authorities. Along the way, Max learns Christian's secret about how he knows so much about the zombies, why he has so much experience dealing with them. And I'll go ahead and tell you the twist. The twist is that Christian was actually infected a long time ago. In fact, all the way back into the Roman era. You see, Christian was there during the first known zombie outbreak during what we call the Nika riots. The Nika riots were an actual historical event in Rome, and it turns out that the history books fabricated a lot of it. In truth, the Nika riots were actually a zombie outbreak that the history books called a riot because, they tried to brush that underneath the rug, didn't want to admit that undead were actually eating people. He had been infected, but for some reason, he did not die. He simply lived on, immortal, not aging, not growing old, nothing. And his body can recover from wounds and injuries much like a zombie. He is the equivalent of an undead individual who figured out how to keep his mind. He doesn't eat people or anything like that. He still has his memories. But that's also the great torture. He watches everyone he loves or cares about die. They grow old and die. He doesn't. He wants to die. It's come to the point where he wants death because he's tired of living with this pain. But since he doesn't know how to, and he's too scared to throw himself into a wood chipper, he's going around killing zombies, hoping that they don't cause any more trouble. So he basically travels all around killing zombies. He's learned several languages, learned several cultures. He just goes where the zombies are. And this, he says, is one of the biggest outbreaks he's seen in a while. And when he learns about the vaccine, he's very interested because he thinks the vaccine might be enough to kill him. Maybe if he takes it, it will kill him because it's supposed to nullify the zombie virus. So he thinks it might kill him. He doesn't tell this to Max at first because he doesn't want to scare her. But along the way, they have to fight their way through not only zombies, but crazed survivors who find out that there's a vaccine and want to use it for themselves. The knowledge that that Max's mother might be dead. Dealing with crazed individuals, some people who just need help. I followed what I thought would work as a zombie story, but there were several problems. The first problem being, of course, Mika and I stopped conversing, which kind of dulled the fun of the story for me. 2, while I did like the idea of Christian and Max teaming up, I also realized that as I was writing them, I was falling into some classic zombie cliches without me even knowing, which means that some of these cliches might be so ingrained in the zombie idea that it might actually be impossible to fully divorce them from each other. Perhaps zombies and these cliches just go hand in hand at this point, which is very unfortunate. And because I started the story with the attempt of trying to avoid those cliches, then that kind of, that hurt. That made it a little bit harder to work on. But I thought that the idea of having someone who is immune to the zombie virus, someone who was suffering in a unique way from the zombie virus. That would be an interesting discussion point, an interesting thing to study, an interesting thing to play with in terms of character. And before you ask, no, I never did finish the story, unfortunate as it is. Am I going to? I don't know. Only one piece of art has ever been done for the story, and that was by Mika herself. And honestly, I'm just not a big enough fan of the zombie genre to keep going with it unless someone wants to offer their aid. I don't mean in art, I mean in just talking with. One of the things that helps me as a writer is talking to people, talking out ideas, working through suggestions, presenting a concept and then talking through it with them or to them. And since no one has really expressed all that much interest in me continuing it, and no one's willing to sit down and chat with me about it, it's kind of like, well, that might be a dead idea in the water, which is fitting because it's about dead people. But that's my position there. What do you think of this story idea? Do you think it's got any merit? Do you think it's any good? Do you think I should even take another look at it? Or do you think it's best to just leave this one buried 6 feet under? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching the story sharing episode. Sorry it's a day late, but crazy things happen. I'll try to get my next story sharing out at the appropriate time. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.